Welcome to the Introduction to Code Editing for the Cynthesizer Workbench, one of a series of basic training videos for the Workbench. In this video, I'll introduce the basics of the code editing features of the IDE and give you some pointers to the most commonly useful features for improving your productivity. So we're going to start out by looking at some code here for a pretty small and simple filter design that would be synthesized with Cynthesizer. We start out here by looking at the filter.cc file. This file implements a number of functions. Actually, it's a class that represents a filter that would be used in a larger design. Scrolling through the code, we can see various different parts of the design, a thread function here, and various parts of the filtering code. If we'd like to get an overall view of the functions that are available, we can just simply click in this top section and scroll through the various functions in the file. Clicking on each one would allow us to go directly to that code. Here, this is the CC file. We often want to edit the header file as well, so we can go directly to that by pressing the F4 function key. And as you can see, that just toggles us directly to the header file, the filter.h file. Here in this top section, we see the name of the file that's currently being edited. If we go and click on that, that's actually a menu item, and we can toggle between the files that we have currently open. If we have more files open than just those two, let's go and open a couple more. You can see that this list obviously gets longer. We can select those files directly from the menu, or we can go to the shortcut keys and select those files much more conveniently from the keyboard using the Control Tab and the Control Shift Tab keystrokes. That will allow us to get a small menu and iterate over those files. So what that's very, very useful for example, if you're just switching backwards and forwards between two files, is Control Tab will flick you backwards and forwards between them. Very convenient. Now, one of the key things about an environment like this is managing the real estate here. What we've seen there is we've got multiple files stacked on top of each other, and we can access them sequentially. Oftentimes we want to see files side by side, and so we can split this pane by selecting the split button here and deciding how we would like to arrange them, whether it's one above the other or side by side. If we split side by side, we can see we have two files here now, and I can go and choose whichever one I would like to see here in this pane. Now, clearly this starts to get a little crowded, and so you got to be careful about how you arrange those. But you can also reduce the space used for the sidebar by hiding it with this small Hide Sidebar button in the bottom left-hand corner. And that gives us a little more real estate for editing, should we want to do that. Now, that's a toggle. We can just go backwards and forwards with that, either using the button or using the keystroke Alt-0. Okay, let's get rid of the split so we can see a little bit more by using the Remove Split button and go back to our code. What I want to first do here is show you a couple of the key editing features. We're going to go over here into the header file for the filter function, and we're going to add a new function here that we'll use in our CC file as well. So here I've created a definition of a function called search my data, and I've given it two arguments, integer A and integer B. Now, normally what I would want to do is go over to my CC file and add this function into that code. There are a number of ways to do that. I can simply right click on this and say Refactor, add definition to filter.cc, and you can see here it automatically creates that function for me. This is all very, very convenient. If I was over here using this function at some point and I wanted to do something like add another argument to this test, as you can see, a small light bulb appeared here at the end of this line. That's basically telling me that the declaration in this file and in the header file no longer match. By simply clicking that, it will update that and make those two things comply. A very convenient way of synchronizing your function definition and declarations. Okay, let's go back to the code over here. Another way that we could have done that is started typing over here. Once I get to a point here where a decision can be made, the tool will propose a number of variables or names that are valid in this scope. That could be functions, that could be variables, or whatever would be legal. And I can either go down and search for what I'm looking for in this menu of all the legal things that could happen here, or I could remember, for example, that it was search something, so I can start typing. It will automatically find that for me. If I press Tab, it shows me the arguments that it proposes for that function. I hit Tab again, Enter, etc. And so this kind of code completion is very, very useful, and you'll find that you become very quickly addicted to this feature since it's so productive. Now, since I've got my function defined in my header file, I've got the body of the function defined, I might want to use it somewhere in my code. And so I would go down and say something like x equals start typing. It automatically knows that function is valid. And it then tells me what kind of arguments I might need to put in here in the body of the call. So y, true. And there we go. This is very, very convenient if you're using functions or classes that you're not 100% familiar with, where you don't remember the names of very complex functions. So it's very good. People using Cynthesizer will often struggle a little bit with getting used to some of the directives. So for example, if we wanted to start typing here CynthWB-Inline, we could say start typing that, and it would start to propose things. And I can go pick one, hit tab, and it tells me what kind of arguments I would need in here to complete my CynthWB-Inline. So as I said, this is really good for starting to use features, functions of a class library or a set of code that you're not completely familiar with, and you don't have to know everything. You don't have to remember every single name. The tool will propose the right names for you, and it really helps with getting things right the first time. So let's go back to a clean version of our filter.cc file, and we'll start to look at some of the other key features that are very, very useful. One of the key things is often perusing code or trying to find things or find out about your code. And so there are a lot of features in the editor that support that kind of behavior. Now I'm going to go through this in the context of actually trying to solve a problem. If we look at these definitions here, these are defined to be 16-bit integers, and I'd be really interested to know whether that is actually a correct width for the kind of expression we have over here. But I don't really know. Maybe I didn't write this code, and I don't really know what each of these variables is defined to be. And so in the editor, I can come over here and I can simply scroll over the top of things like this #define, and it says that that has a value of 100. Now what I could also do is, as I'm holding down the control key, which you can't see, but I am, as I hold down that control key, each of the things, the symbols that I scroll over, becomes a hyperlink. And so, for example, I could actually click on that, and it takes me to that definition of max alpha, so I could see what it is, in case that was something more complex than just a plain define. I go back and press the back button, go back to my expression. So now I might be interested in, well, what is PLPF? So I click on that, it takes me to the declaration. This is an argument to the function. It's of type RGB8. Okay, what's RGB? So I click on that, and I get to see that this is a templated class that takes 3 variables. RG and B, as we would expect, each of the width W that was passed in. So let's go back. So we see this is RGB8. I have 3 8-bit values. And in this way, we can very, very easily get around code and understand things without, using the old form of grep and search and hunting around trying to find things and losing our place. The backwards and forwards through the hierarchy, through the search path is also very, very convenient. We could also go to the function that we have here. I click on that, and it takes me to the declaration in the header file for that function. Oftentimes, I'm very interested in, for example, what is the definition of a port. Here I see some ports that I'm using. I'm doing puts and gets to these to this line buffer. I'd be very interested to see how that's declared. And so I can go over here, and this will highlight the line of code where that line buffer is declared. Very, very good way of getting around code and understanding code, particularly if you didn't initially write it. Now, another thing that's also very useful, particularly when you have functions, is to try and find where a function is used. So I have this function blend HPF LPF. I can simply go right-click on that and say find usages. It's also Control-Shift-U, and it will search through all of the files in the project for any use of that symbol. And I can open those trees for each file. Double-clicking will take me directly to that. So this shows me that I've called that function from this line. Now that's the only place it's been called from in this case. Now let's take a look as well at simply finding things through regular search. Pressing the Control F key will bring up a search window at the bottom of our editor here. We can type in any string we want here, and it will start to find those things immediately. We can go from one search match to the next, backwards and forwards. very, very conveniently. We can also do find and replace by putting in replacement strings here and iterate over them. This particular kind of find is restricted to the current file being edited. Oftentimes what we want to do is look at doing a search or a search and replace in particular over a very specific region. We can select that region, go back to Control F, and now you can see that there's a box drawn around that particular set of text. And if I say alpha, it will only find the alphas inside that bounding box, and I can do search and replace over a very specific region in the file. A very useful functionality. Escape gets rid of all that. I can also search over a broader range of content by looking for particular patterns in the entire set of files in the project. To do that, we use the Control-Shift-F functionality. We get a different window here, and if I say something like unroll, it now tells me all the files in which it found that string, and I can pop those open and see each case of a match on that string. Double-clicking on any one of those will take me to it, etc., etc. So I can quickly look at all cases where a particular string is matched. This can be extended also to all the files in the filing system that it finds, or all the files simply as part of the project. Okay, so let's turn to a few other small features that are very, very useful in the UI. One of the things that I tend to use a lot is the escape key. Escape basically takes you back to edit mode and clears away any of the optional windows that you have, like the find window. So if I press escape, you'll see that that window goes away. If I happen to be in some other mode, like the welcome mode, pressing escape would also take me back to edit mode. Basically, if you hit it a few times, it will take you back to edit mode and get rid of all the clutter so that you have just this view that you see here now. A couple of other block editing features. If I select multiple lines and hit Control/, it will comment those lines, and Control/ again will toggle that comment off. I can also press simply Tab and it will indent those, and Shift Tab will unindent those lines. Another thing that's a very useful feature is the ability to close windows as we're done with them, and the Control-W key will close the current window, prompt you to save if you need to do that. If I say no, it will go away, and Control-Shift-W will close all windows and take me back to an empty screen. That concludes our demo on Introduction to Code Editing. Please review the other videos in the series to learn all the common tricks for getting up to speed as quickly as possible.